ever feel like everyone's like pushing us to be kind of more nomadic these days?
More nomadic.
Yeah, like not necessarily pack your bags, live in a yurt nomadic, although, hey, more power to you if that's your thing.
Right.
But like in the way we learn and adapt to, new ideas and new cultures, you've been super into exploring like alternative education, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Particularly the idea of nomadic schools, and get ready for this deep dive. Man, let me tell you, it's been a trip.
It really is fascinating. It's more than just classrooms without walls. It's like these communities make us rethink like everything we thought we knew about education.
Totally.
The research we're diving into today, it really shows how these modern nomadic communities are actually making it work. The good, the bad, and all the creative ways they're making education a part of life on the move.
It's like field trip every day, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm picturing kids learning geometry while they're like building a yurt.
You're not far off, actually. The research, it shows this resurgence in nomadic living, and it's not just who you'd expect. We're talking families like, I think the source called them the Martins, who just sold their home, packed up the kids, and now they're working remotely while traveling the world.
Oh, wow.
It's not just digital nomads anymore. It's a whole movement. People looking for deeper cultural experiences, wanting a stronger connection with nature, or, hey, maybe they just need a break from the usual.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got the why, this desire for different ways of living and learning. But let's get into the how. Because even with the best intentions, traditional education just doesn't seem to fit with a nomadic lifestyle,
Absolutely. It's like a fundamental clash. Traditional education, it's designed for people who stay put, right? Fixed locations, same curriculum everywhere you go. But nomadic life, it's all about going with the flow, adapting, constantly changing.
Yeah, like that example from the research about needing proof of address.
Oh, yeah.
When your life is literally about not having an address, talk about a bureaucratic nightmare.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Imagine constant school changes, kids always having to make new friends, only to say goodbye a few months later.
Yeah.
And the curriculum gaps, that's a huge one.
So homeschooling almost seems like, well, the obvious answer, right?
Right.
Total flexibility, learning tailored to your kid. You're always there with your family. But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
It has its own challenges. The study mentioned this couple, Lucas and Alara, who homeschooled their twins while they were crossing the Sahara Desert.
Wow.
An incredible commitment. But the source mentioned the kids really struggled with social isolation, and the parents, they felt like they had to be teachers and guides and adventurers all at the same time. It's a lot.
Okay, so maybe there's no easy answer, right? Like ditching the traditional classroom for life on the road, it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what we're really diving into today. Nomadic schools. What are they, and how are they changing the game when it comes to education for these communities?
It's as much a philosophy as a physical space.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to recreate a regular school on wheels, they take the core of nomadic life adaptability, resourcefulness, community, and they build the education around that.
Okay, so give me an example. How does that actually work in a classroom that could be like a yurt one day and a rainforest clearing the next?
Think of it like a dynamic curriculum. Instead of a rigid syllabus, it's constantly evolving based on where they are, what resources are available, even the culture they're immersed in at that moment. Like there's this group mentioned in the research, the Global Explorers. They made a school out of a bus. It meant their community always had a consistent learning environment no matter where they roamed.
Consistent community, that makes sense. But how do you create a consistent learning experience when the setting is constantly changing? Like, designing a curriculum that's globally relevant and locally immersive at the same time, that seems pretty tough.
It is a balancing act. The research had some really cool examples, though. There's this Sky Nomad school in Kenya. They actually integrated Maasai culture directly into their lessons.
Wow.
Learning about their traditions, their way of life, even dabbling in the language.
Finding those organic connections, right?
Yeah.
So what they're learning actually reflects where they are in the world.
Yeah. Another really interesting example was the ocean voyagers. They had this chance encounter with dolphins, totally unplanned, turned into a whole week exploring biology, mythology, even pop culture. They took a fleeting moment and turned it into a learning experience they could really sink their teeth into.
That's incredible. I'm starting to see how in this model, the world truly does become the classroom. But I have to wonder, how do you even begin to measure success when the learning environment is so fluid?
That's where you see a shift away from standardized tests and toward a more well-rounded approach to assessment, like project-based learning, presentations, getting feedback from peers. Remember, community is huge in nomadic life, so feedback and collaboration, they become central to learning.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
But let's be real, technology has to play a huge role in all of this, right? Especially in remote areas. Staying connected, accessing information, that's got to be crucial. And how do you ensure some level of educational consistency for kids who are constantly on the move?
You've hit on a critical point. The research shows nomadic communities are incredibly resourceful when it comes to technology. We're talking satellite internet in the Sahara, mobile hotspots in the rainforest, even combining local schools with online platforms like Global Trek Learning, I think it was called, to bridge the gaps.
Okay, so they're finding ways around the tech challenges. But what about the social and emotional well-being of these kids? It can't be easy to constantly adapt to new environments, make new friends, only to say goodbye a few months later. How do nomadic schools address that?
You've hit on another really important point. It's not just about academics, it's about teaching them to be resilient, adaptable, and building a strong sense of belonging.
So it's about giving these kids the tools to, really thrive in a world that's constantly changing, right?
Right.
Emotional intelligence, cultural sensitivity, adaptability, that's huge. Those are valuable skills no matter where you end up, yurt or no yurt.
Yeah.
But how do they actually pull that off? It's going to be more than just, oh, hey, by the way, we're moving again next week.
It's definitely very intentional. The research really highlighted strong community bonds, rituals and routines, things that give them a sense of stability even when everything around them is in flux.
Okay, so like anchors, right? Those points of connection that keep them grounded even when their location is always changing?
Exactly. Think of it this way. For nomadic communities, the classroom might be different all the time, but the values, the relationships, those are the constants. And that creates a really powerful sense of continuity for the kids.
It really makes you rethink the whole idea of community, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be tied to a place. It's more about the shared experiences, the values, that feeling of belonging.
You got it. And I think that's where the real magic of nomadic education is, It forces us to really examine these concepts, these structures that we just take for granted.
Yeah. It's like it's holding a mirror up to our own ideas about learning, about community, about what it even means to live a good life, But okay, let's get real for a sec. We've been geeking out over all these amazing examples, but how much of this is actually, transferable to the rest of us? Someone's listening to this. Maybe they're not about to pack their bags and join a caravan of traveling scholars. What can they take away from all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It'd be easy to say, oh, this is all very inspiring, but it only works for these people. But I think that misses the point. We're really talking about principles here, different approaches to learning, which you can adapt to all kinds of environments.
Okay, so break it down for me. How do we take these big ideas, dynamic curriculums, learning as a community, the world as a classroom, and actually apply them to a life that's maybe not constantly on the move?
Let's start with that dynamic curriculum. Now, I know not every school can just ditch their textbooks and let the wind decide what they're learning that day.
Although, I gotta say, a little more spontaneity in the lesson plan wouldn't hurt.
I'm with you. But the key takeaway here is relevance. It's about connecting the curriculum back to the students' lives, the community, the world around them. Think local history projects, bringing in guest speakers from different backgrounds, even just getting the kids outside and letting them actually apply what they're learning in a real way.
So it's about making learning feel real, right?
Yeah.
Breaking down those barriers between textbook and real life. I can get behind that. What about this whole multi-age learning thing? That seems a little trickier to pull off in a traditional school.
It's not about getting rid of grade levels entirely. It's about understanding that kids learn at their own pace and in their own ways. Think about adding in more opportunities for mentorship, cross-grade collaboration, even something as simple as reading groups, but not split up by age. Create those chances for kids to learn from each other.
It's about respecting the individual within the community, like fostering that we're all in this together spirit, even when everyone's at different points in their learning journey.
Exactly. And that sense of community, that's another big one we can all learn from. Nomadic schools, they rely on those strong community bonds, not just for practical support, but because learning is a group activity for them.
Yeah, like how the Desert Dreamers, I think that was their name, when they had to deal with that flash flood, right?
Oh, yeah.
It became a lesson in resourcefulness, in working together, problem solving. They learned by being there for each other when things got tough.
Exactly. Now, most classrooms aren't facing down a flash flood every week, but that doesn't mean you can't foster that same sense of teamwork and support. Group projects, peer feedback, even just making the classroom a safe space to ask for help, to celebrate each other's wins, those all build that community spirit.
It's about acknowledging that, hey, we learn better together.
Right.
Like when we feel connected, supported, like we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
For sure. And that brings us back to technology. You remember that student taking a virtual class like from the jungle?
Yeah.
It still blows my mind. It just shows you how powerful technology can be for connection. It breaks down barriers and can bring those nomadic principles into any learning environment.
So it's not really about the gadgets themselves, right? It's more about using tech in a way that creates those opportunities for collaboration, for access, for getting diverse voices and perspectives involved in the learning process.
Exactly. Think virtual field trips to museums across the globe, connecting with classrooms in other countries to work on projects together, using online tools to personalize learning. The sky's the limit, really.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. It's not about copying the nomadic lifestyle exactly. It's about taking those main ideas, that mindset, and finding ways to work them into our own lives, our own learning environments.
Right. And I think that's incredibly empowering. It means even if we can't all just pack up and live a life of travel and adventure, we can still embrace that nomadic spirit. The curiosity, the openness to new experiences, that willingness to see the world as our classroom.
So it's less about the where and more about the how of learning, yeah. It's about cultivating that adaptable, curious, community-focused way of approaching life, no matter where we happen to be on a map. But I have to ask, are there downsides to all this? It can't all be sunshine and dolphins and learning geometry from yurts, right?
That's a really good point. I mean, nomadic education, it's amazing, right? But it's not without its, its challenges. It's like anything else, there are always going to be trade-offs.
Okay, so let's not shy away from those. What are some of those downsides? The things that maybe don't always make it into those glossy Instagram posts, right?
Well, funding is a big one. Maintaining that lifestyle, even if you're really minimal, it takes resources.
Yeah.
And giving kids a quality education, whether it's in a traditional classroom or a yurt, it costs money.
That's true, because even with a really dynamic, adaptable curriculum, you still need those materials, tech, even specialized teachers, depending on what they're learning. It must be tough for these communities to make that work financially.
Yeah, the research mentioned a lot of nomadic schools. They get creative. They rely on a mix of community support, bartering their skills even. Some partner with local groups, share resources.
It takes a village, take to a whole other level. But even then, access to things must be so different depending on where they are in the world. What about special needs education? Or kids who just learn better in a more structured setting?
And that adds another whole layer, right? The nomadic life is freeing, for sure, but it definitely has limits. The research talked about how families find ways to make it work. Finding specialists along their route, using online resources. Some even plan their travel around being in certain places at certain times, but it's definitely not like a one-size-fits-all kind of solution.
Sounds like it takes a lot of balancing those priorities, right?
Yeah.
Amazing hands-on learning experience versus making sure every kid's getting what they individually need to thrive.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to, to look at this with open eyes. It's not about pretending nomadic life is perfect. It's about seeing both the potential and the hurdles and appreciating how much effort these communities put into making it work.
So we can learn from that, that focus on community, being adaptable, using what they've got. Because let's face it, we're all dealing with a world that's changing crazy fast. Right?
Absolutely. And whether or not we're nomads in the literal sense, learning those skills, how to adjust to new things, to be open to new ideas, to roll with the punches, those are going to be essential for all of us going forward.
It's in a way, we're all becoming more nomadic, right? Whether we plan to or not. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's about going through life with that same curiosity, that same openness, that willingness to see the whole world as our classroom, wherever we happen to be.
I love that. It's about embracing being lifelong learners,
Yeah.
Seeking out new things to learn, connecting with people and ideas that shake things up a little.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm walking away feeling actually pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
Nomadic education has its challenges for sure. But the resilience and the creativity of these communities, that really shines through.
And that's what we should take with us, that there's not one right way to do things. But by sticking to those core values, being adaptable, supporting each other, being resourceful, you can create a really meaningful learning experience, no matter where you are, no matter what your situation is.
That classroom might be the one without walls.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe the most important journey any of us can take is the one that turns us into lifelong learners. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep that nomadic spirit alive.